Hello, AP English Language and Composition students. Welcome to Lesson 38, Logical Fallacies, Part 1. This is a retake. The first one the sound didn't come through. So, here we go. What are logical fallacies? They are errors in logic, in an argument. And we're going to look at all 14 different types in these two videos. This is Part 1. So, in one type of logical fallacy is this type, either or, and that's when the argument is not valid because it is not presenting all of the viable options, only presenting a few, right? And that's not realistic. It can also be called false dichotomy, right? As another name instead of either or fallacy. So, do I have an example? I think I do. Right. So an example I have is, for instance, maybe there's a dormitory or a building that is in bad shape. So Caldwell Hall is in bad shape. Either we tear it down and put up a new building, or we continue to risk students' safety. Obviously, we shouldn't risk anyone's safety, so we must tear the building down. No, there are other options, all right? Not just the drastic one. There could be some remodeling, or maybe adding on or moving to a different building on campus or something. We don't have to necessarily tear it down. So, when something is presented very narrowly, it's probably not accurate. It's called either or. Our next one is begging the question. So, what does begging the question involve? Well, when you hear this term, and this is one that you might hear in the news, read about it in the newspaper, when someone refers to this, just generally it means raising the question sometimes, but in argumentation it means conceding a point or not trying to prove a point, right? So, begging the question, how do you see that in an argument? Oftentimes by restating the original premise. So your claim that something, you should believe in something or something is true, your claim is stated, but the proof for it is really just restating the claim. So we're going to look at an example of that, or you'll hear an example of that. Let's see here. Yeah, here's my example. So it has to do with the issue of euthanasia, that's ending someone's life to prevent suffering. So here is the claim. Active euthanasia is morally acceptable. It is a decent ethical thing to help another human being escape suffering through death. So our claim is it's morally acceptable, active euthanasia. But the support for it, in this case, when the words morally acceptable are really restated, it's just paraphrased, ethical thing, decent ethical thing is stated in the support, it's really just restating the idea of morally acceptable in the claim. And active euthanasia, what's stated in the support is helping another human being escape suffering through death. That is active euthanasia. So when you restate a premise in your support, you are begging the question. You are avoiding proving, right, the truth. So you have to give some other reasons why a claim is true. Otherwise, you're begging the question. Now, I do not like to, actually, these two together, begging the question and circular argument, they could be exactly synonymous because this type of fallacy is really, again, restating. In your conclusion, you restate your premise. And so the example I just gave you up here for begging the question is really the same for a circular argument. So you could use these interchangeably a lot of the time. Some of the time, no. But I'll give you an example of a circular argument. So an example for that is, I like to eat out because I enjoy different foods and restaurants. I like to eat out because I enjoy different foods and restaurants. The support after because is really stating what the original claim part of it was. All right, so I like to eat out because I enjoy different foods and restaurants. You're just going in a circle. So yes, it's really sometimes the same as this. All right, next one. In the Latin, it's post hoc, ergo propter hoc. In the English, that means this. After this, therefore, because of this. Faulty cause effect is really what's happening. So how does that actually, what does that look like in an example? Superstitions fall under this category. So for instance, say that you play a certain sport and you have a certain game or meet or match, and you normally don't play that well, but a certain time you wore orange socks and then you played really well. Did your playing well result from the orange socks that you put on before you played? Unlikely. All right, so that is example of faulty cause-effect. Just because something happens after something doesn't mean that the thing that happened right before the result was related to the result. So that's that. Moving on. Bandwagon appeal. Teenagers use this a lot. Everyone else is going to this movie, I should be allowed to go to this movie too. That's all that is. So is it logical that it's a good idea to believe something or do something because others are believing or doing it? Not necessarily. You have to look at what they're believing in or what they're doing in and of itself, not just because a lot of people are doing it. There could be a correlation, but it's not necessarily true that the actions on the part of a lot of people justify the quality of the thing they're doing. Not all the time. So, ad hominem. This means to the man, or in what it really means in action is attacking the man. So, I'm relating it to this different term here, red herring. A red herring is a very general type of logical fallacy. This is a specific type of this more general type. So I mentioned red herring first. It's anything that involves distraction in order to get people to believe your point, accept your point. Why do we use the term red herring? Because when there's a herring is a fish, and a dried smoked herring is red color, and dried smoked herring were used before fox hunts, tied onto a string and pulled across the eventual trail that the hunters would be following in a fox hunt. And so the hounds would be distracted from the scent so that it wasn't so easy and not very challenging for the hounds to find the fox. So they would be distracted by the scent of the red herring. So any argument that has distractions in order to convince people, that is a flaw, right? This is a specific type, ad hominem. You're distracting from the argument by attacking a certain person, right? So let's see if I have an example of both of those, right? First of all, this one, red herring. Now, say you have, at the election booths, you have a ballot with a lot of proposals on it to vote for. And so there's a certain one that is being supported in an argument. Actually, they don't want you to vote for this. They want you to vote no on this particular proposal. So they say, we admit this measure is popular, and then they're going to, instead of refuting and saying why you shouldn't, vote for that proposal. We also urge you to note that there are so many other proposals on this ballot that the whole thing is getting ridiculous. So they're trying to distract you instead of trying to prove their point why this is a proposal you shouldn't vote for. Just saying there's a lot of other proposals, like the idea behind it being there's too many, and if we say yes on all, or if we say no on, if we say yes on all of them, then, well, our taxes will be raised. So they're trying to distract you, right, from trying to prove their point. Now, for ad hominem, attacking the man, an example might be, and this can also be called poisoning the well, poisoning the well. For instance, though, an example might be, Senator so-and-so just divorced his wife. How can his proposal be any good? Well, his proposal might be great. His personal life, not so great, but they're not necessarily affecting one another. Okay, so that's that. Next one, hasty generalization. This will be the last one on this video, because I start with straw man on the second video. So hasty generalization. You draw a conclusion, but that conclusion is based on very limited information, so it's not valid. Either not enough people to create a sufficient sample, or maybe not varied enough sample to approximate reality. So, hasty generalization, I'm jumping to conclusions, in other words. For instance, it might be, say in another state where they allow smoking, because that's the example I have in my mind. They allow smoking in public buildings, so on a college campus, you go to the student center, you see some students smoking there, and if you draw the conclusion that, well, I see most of the students in the student center smoking, so I guess all the college students down here, or most of them, smoke. Probably not true. Those who want to smoke want to gather together and smoke socially, and this is the area they smoke in, so they're concentrated there. So it's probably more the case. So hasty generalization. All right, hopefully this sound is audible to you, and then you would listen to this video, fill out the sheet, and go on to the next video, lesson 39. All right, thank you.